Eddie Barnwell. I'm the executive director and founder of Michigan Recovery Movement. I have a long history of addiction. Right, I'm somebody who grew up with addicted family members. I'm somebody who used with family members. I was able to find it close to home, right? And I almost thought it was like almost how like drinking is socially acceptable with the bars and everything. Like the things I were doing were almost normal in my world. So I never really realized I was doing something so horrible, right? Because like the people I was doing them with were well established in life. And I never thought it was a problem until I did. That's usually how addiction works. After about 20 years of powder cocaine use, I was with a different family member who introduced me to crack cocaine, and that was a wrap, right? All the functional usage that I thought I was doing, which was never functional, but all of that went out the window. I started acting very much so out of my character. I was doing a lot of weird stuff in general. So basically, the end of my run was, the person I was dating, she kind of caught on to the weirdness because I was not acting like myself, the person that she's known for years. In the matter of a week, I smashed my car and my father's car, leaving the same drug house in Detroit, and so I needed a ride to work, and I was working in the union. I was a working union contractor, and on the way home, she had picked me up. And what I didn't know is that she found the abundance of narcotics that I had hidden in my house, because I thought I was a real sneaky guy. I thought I was really good at hiding stuff, and apparently putting all your drugs on the top shelf of your bathroom isn't the most stellar spot to hide them, because she found them. And on the ride home, I thought she was being sweet and just rubbing my leg, but what she was doing was she was feeling for the pipe that I had, so that way I couldn't say that it's not mine. So without a doubt. And that night, once I went to sleep, she called my family members, my brothers, and I woke up, to my surprise, around, my girlfriend was there, both of my brothers, their wives were all standing around my bed. And instantly, because my parents were there, my first thought was, who died? And they said, Eddie, come on, come talk to me in the kitchen real quick, we gotta talk. And as I walked into the kitchen, I look at my dinner table, and I seen all the drugs that she had found sitting on the table, and instantly I went into, those aren't mine. You guys are wrong. And she goes, Eddie, you're lying. I felt the pipe in your pocket. And at that point, I was just angry. I felt like I was being attacked. And I wasn't willing to get any kind of help until the ultimatum part came out. My oldest brother, he ran the union I worked for, and he said, Eddie, if you don't go to treatment tomorrow, we got a bed for you already. If you don't go tomorrow, you'll never work in our union again. And I said, I don't need your union. I don't care. My girlfriend said, Eddie, if you don't go to this bed, I'm going to leave you. I said, goodbye. I'm not interested. You guys are wrong. I'm fine, right? As addicts, we're victims, right? We never want to admit there's a problem. And then my middle brother, who's an attorney and has lots of cop friends, made it known to me that he had already called his police buddies, and they were just waiting on another call, because if I didn't accept treatment, that they were going to come get me, and I was going to get clean either way. So needless to say, I thought going to treatment sounded like a good idea. This was at the end of my run. I went off to a treatment center out in the middle of nowhere, and I had a really long detox there. And after the worst hell that I could imagine, right, the worst hell of detox and feeling so sick, I realized that something had to change, right? And treatment's great for clarity. right? The magic stuff happens outside in the programs and what you do after, right? But I had to take that adult time out. And for the first time in my whole adult life, I had some clarity. And I'll tell you what, the whole reason, like, to be honest, one of the biggest reasons I started this place, right? But the reason I started Michigan Recovery Movement is because one person had such an impact on me. And the funny thing is, like, we're not super close now. Like, he doesn't even work at that facility anymore. But this guy could have been a televangelist for recovery. His groups were just so animated and so live. And coming out of almost like, a couple weeks in a detox facility, and walking into his groups, it was exactly what I needed. And to this day, nobody's really impacted me the way this gentleman has, right? And there's been a lot of influences. I got a lot of mentors, a lot of great people in my life today, what I call my cut men, right? But this one guy, he taught such an incredible group that I felt later into my recovery that if I could ever impact one person the way that this gentleman impacted me, then all of this would be worth it, right? We started Michigan Recovery Movement. I have funded this pretty much out of that union pension that I was speaking of before. And I'm blessed to have those resources available, right? But everything you see in this building, everything that we've done thus far has been funded by passion, right? Has been funded because somebody took the time to do it to me, right? Somebody impacted my life. And that person, his name's Taylor. And he truly, there isn't enough gratitude I could show him. There are no thank yous I could say to him that would ever amount to what he's actually done in my life. I'm also somebody who left treatment, and the day I left, Taylor goes, Eddie, he goes, do me a favor. And I used to be loyal to a fault. I said, I'd do anything, bro. What do you want me to do? He goes, I want you to go to the 12-step meeting when you leave. I want you to go today. And it just so happens that meeting, that very first meeting, I said, sure. And I went, and there was a little coffee shop that has a meeting. And at this time it was COVID. Everybody was outside. It was bizarre, right? When I walked in, I go, this is weird. I don't feel comfortable here. And I went to walk out. And let me say this before I get to the next part, is that the very table I sat at turned out to be some of my best friends that I still talk to every single day today. The very first table, right? And the guy who sponsored me the first couple of years of my recovery, he was at that table, and I got weirded out with the hugging and people telling me they love me. I didn't come from a world where we told our bros that, right? So I thought it was very fake. I thought it was nobody could be this happy. One thing I never understood in my entire adult life was being happy. And I went to leave, and the guy who sponsored me, he followed me out. He goes, hey bro, where you going? And I said, I'll see you another time. I gotta go, family emergency. I was lying, right? He goes, give me your number. I said, okay. So I gave him my number. He goes, I'll see you tomorrow. And then just from there, like, he kept calling me. And then I found my home group, which really changed the game for me. I experienced a love that I never understood in my life, right? Like, me and my family are very close. We're very loving, always have been. But, there's some dysfunction there too. When I came in here, these people didn't even know me, and they just loved me unconditionally. That's what recovery is. That saying that somebody was talking about earlier, we'll love you till you love you. That is the most genuine statement in the world. The primary purpose to my program is to continue to carry on the message to the addict who still suffers. And I've dedicated my life to that primary purpose. And again, that's only because somebody did it to me, and it impacted my life so much. Going from a milk crate in a trap house to doing what we're doing today is something, right? And anybody could do that. There's nothing special about me or any one of my board members or anybody. We're not unique. We're not unicorns. We're just doing something that somebody did for us. And to pass that along is something very special. After some years of recovery, I had a decent little chunk of recovery. My best friend in the world, my dad, he got sick. And And when he got sick, like for the first time, like we went from being like best friends and having this weird friend relationship to having like a real dad. And he got real sick, and I felt like it was time just, to take care of him, be with him. The time I needed my program the most, I like turned my back on recovery, on my people. They say, like, if you're gonna relapse, pick up the phone. I didn't even have to make a phone call. They were calling me, and I just wouldn't answer. After 5 years of being around the program, and like the last night that my dad went into the hospital and we knew he wasn't coming home, I decided to ultimately make a horrible choice after 5 years. I used my drug of choice that night, and I said, I'm only gonna do this much. And it turned into 3 months of the worst living hell I ever knew. Far worse than the 20-some years I was using prior to that. In those 3 months, I saw the darkest part of me, of my life. And this is after years of working in recovery. I've worked at other, with other organizations. And there's nothing worse. They say the program blows your buzz. And there's nothing more real than that. And then he passed, and it just got much worse. And the hardest part about that whole relapse was that my dad was still alive when I was using, and he died very worried about me. And that's one of my biggest regrets, because, he was so excited about my recovery up till then. And he felt good because for the first time in my life, he was able to kind of chill. He felt good about where he was at and where his family was. He didn't have to worry about nobody. And then I just went and burned everything I loved right down to the ground. Everything I worked for, everything. I made a fool out of myself. I was asking everybody for money in the program. Like, it was weird. I got really weird again. And I don't know. I'm a firm believer of a power greater than myself, and I'm a firm believer that he's resting easy today because he can see the cool stuff we're doing, and a lot of that motivated me to actually start Michigan Recovery Movement. For the first time, the first time around, like I said, I was kind of like voluntold to go to treatment, right? I never expected to find recovery. I never thought I was going to be clean. I didn't want to do that. I was pleasing people I love, and that was it. And I didn't want to go to jail, to be honest. So I never really worked a first step, ever. I skipped that one and I just kept going. And they say, like, if you don't work them in order, you're in a lot of trouble. And I found that out 5 years later. The first time I ever worked first step was actually, he's my vice chairman. I called my best friend in the program, and I told him, I said, buddy, for the first time in my life, I'm going to admit this. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm stuck. And I think I'm going to die down here. He said, no, you're not, man. He goes, you ready to do something about it? I said, I got no other choice, right? He came and got me. He took me out to treatment. I've been clean again ever since. That whole situation, like I said, I've worked in recovery before. That whole situation, like, really motivated me to do what he did for me, for others.